What's up, horror fan? Welcome back to the channel. So today we are doing a movie review on a film called You'll Never Find Me. Now, I know this movie has been out for a minute. I have a complete backlog of films that I'm trying to get through and TV series I'm trying to get through. So I finally got to the point on my list where I was able to finally sit down and watch You'll Never Find Me from end to end without having to stop it, without being interrupted. So if you don't know about this movie came out around late 2023, I believe. So again, it's been out for a minute. Like I mentioned, I'm trying to get through my backlog of films. It did come out in the US in March 2024, but again, it came out much earlier in other regions in 2023. So I finally got through it. It didn't gross a whole lot worldwide, and when you hear the number I'm about ready to tell you, yeah, it wasn't much. It was less than $19,000 gross worldwide box office. Now, we all know that could be due to a number of things. When films like this, and this is an Australian film, Australian horror film, so when films like this get released and when they're released in only one or two regions, and even within those regions, if the theatrical numbers aren't there, if it's only going into, let's say, 100 screens and there's no marketing, I would expect the numbers going to be low. And it being a horror film, that's just another thing that happens to, check the box off on it, where it doesn't get a lot of, again, marketing, a lot of attention. So I'm not surprised to see that box office number was low. But this is a horror thriller film. I will be giving a spoiler review on this. If you haven't seen it already, I'd be a bit surprised. Again, it was on my list to see for quite some time. It came out in March 2024. I'm just now getting to it here in the new year 2025. It is streaming on Shudder. So if you have Shudder, you can go there. Again, the name of the film is You'll Never Find Me. I think it's worth a watch if you like these psychological thriller type horror films. I don't look at it more as a thriller. It was more of a psychological film for me. You definitely, as you watch it, it's a slow burn, so it starts to draw you in. And I feel it does keep your attention as you're wanting to know what's going to happen. So I'm going to give just a quick synopsis of the film, and then we're going to jump right into details about this film. So you may or may not know this film. The casting is very small. So there's only two main characters, two main actors in this film. They are played by Brendan Rock, who plays Patrick, and Jordan Cowan, who plays the Visitor. She doesn't have a name in the film. She's just known as the Visitor. Patrick is the focal point of the film, but the back and forth happens between these two throughout the entire film. Now, towards the end of the film, probably the last 10 to 15 minutes, there are other actresses and a couple other kid actors in it, but they're just known as, Caravan Park Kid number 1 and Park number 2 and Woman number 1, Woman number 2. So they don't have any lines, they don't have any significance as far as interacting with Patrick or the Visitor. They're there to fill a portion or piece of the story that's been played out or told earlier on in the film. So again, there aren't many actors or actresses in this. I think there's a total of, even if you count those ones, there's only a total of, I think, 7 in the entire film. So this is one of those you've heard me talk about where if you're in it, and real quickly, it is all filmed in one central location. It's all filmed within a caravan. So for those of you in the US, that would be a trailer, like in a trailer park. That's what a caravan park is. So that's where it's centrally being filmed, inside of a caravan within primarily just 2 or 3 small rooms, and that's it. And again, all the dialogue is happening between these two. You've heard me talk about this before. I think it's hard to do a film with that limited amount of, I don't want to call it space, but when you centralize it, you got to have it on point. Your writing has to be on point, the acting has to be on point. So I felt this one met that criteria, especially for a horror film. You don't see too many horror films centrally focused in one space between a small number of people. So let's jump right into the spoiler details of this review. So as I mentioned, this film is primarily happening between two characters. Patrick and the visitor. So as this film starts off, it's a very stormy night. Patrick is he's a secluse. He lives by himself, doesn't really interact with anybody, and he has I don't want to call it insomnia, but as the story plays out, you would believe he does have insomnia. So it's late at night and there's a banging on his door, and all this is happening during a very loud and hard thunderstorm. So he hears a banging on the door, and he opens the door to find the visitor, played by Jordan, as we mentioned previously. So he has a brief interaction with her. What do you want? She's looking to find a phone, to make a phone call in order to get a ride back to where she needs to be. Reluctantly, he lets her in, and then they start this dialogue. As you can probably tell from this film, if you have seen it or if you haven't, there is this tension between them right off the bat. She's very distrusting of him because he's giving off this vibe of, creepy, middle-aged old man living by himself in this caravan or trailer park, and he's not very interactive in the interactions, and the way he talks to her, it kind of puts her off a bit. So she immediately goes on guard, trying to just either get help immediately so she can leave. She doesn't want to be there. So as the story plays out, she's telling him, where she's been at. She's been at the beach. She ran from there to try to get a ride, and this is where she ended up. Now the story doesn't start to make sense to him because he lives in the area and knows that the beach isn't very close, so it's not like a quick jog from the beach to where he's at. So he's already finding holes in her story. Now as they start to play back and forth, she's wanting to leave. He's wanting to, I don't want to say keep her there, but he keeps telling her, oh, well, it's a bad storm. I don't have a phone, but there is a pay phone. It's on the other side of the park, but you wouldn't know how to get there. I'll walk you there, but I'll only do that once the storm passes. Again, she's very reluctant, wanting to go right away, but for whatever reason, she decides not to. She heeds his warning and doesn't. He does give her change to use the payphone because she doesn't have any, so he's willing to help her out in that way. And she's remaining there while her clothes are drying on this space heater that he uses to heat the entire caravan. So he convinces her once again, why don't you wait, let your clothes dry, wait for the storm to pass, and reluctantly she does. So they continue to have this back and forth of, I don't want to say trying to get to know each other, but again, almost that uncomfortable dialogue that you have with somebody that you don't know and you really don't know what to say. So as the story goes on, he convinces her to take a shower to warm up. Again, she's very reluctant, not knowing, who is this person? He seems kind of sketchy, but again, she does it anyways. So she goes to take a shower, and while she's in the shower, she starts to, I don't want to say she's starting to see things, but there is a moment where as she looks down, there's mud and blood going down the drain. She starts to panic and only to realize she's seeing things. So she gets out, and there's a towel left for her. He's also got a jumper for her out as well. A jumper being like a sweatshirt is what that is, for those of you who don't know. So she comes out. He starts to make food for her, which she's very reluctant to eat, and not knowing what he could have done to the food. And again, he's having this very mysterious oddness about him as he's making the food for her. Hands it over to her. But again, as he's starting to now clean the kitchen, clean the pan, he's starting to see things where the soup looks like it's probably like a tomato soup or a bisque. It turns to blood as he's washing it, and then it goes away. She, with his back turned, doesn't want to eat the food and ends up pouring it into his boots that he would be using. It was kind of an odd choice to do that, just from a film, even for the film's perspective, because at some point he will have to put those on, and he does look to need to put those on, but ends up putting something else on. And he knows that she does it. In a later conversation, he mentions, I'm a little, worried about putting my boots on. Then she fully admits, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. So they eventually start to grow. I don't want to say a bond, but she becomes more comfortable with him, right? So we have a moment where they have sit down where they're playing a card game, and before they start playing this card game, he flat out tells her, look, if you want to leave, I'm not keeping you here, I'm not going to force you to stay, go. Almost, I don't want to say trying to make her feel guilty, but she is, in a way, does start to feel guilty, as if she feels like, oh, wait a minute, I feel bad, I don't want to give off that impression that you think that like either thinking you're something that you're not. So they sit down, play this game, and they start. It's called bullshit, where you lay down your cards face down, saying, if you lay down 3 cards, you're saying you have like 3 nines, and the person either believes you that you're laying down 3 nines, or they call bullshit. You have to turn them over, and if they aren't 3 nines, you lose. So they're playing this game. So while they're playing this, they're telling each other their stories. So he's describing how he met his wife that's no longer around. And then she starts to describe just real briefly about herself. But as the story goes on, and as the film goes on, she realizes that he's not telling the truth, because she's drinking out of this cup that she recognizes has lipstick on it. This is now where the story turns, and we find ourselves in the heat of everything that's going on. But there's a power outage as well that takes place in the caravan, so they're using like this little light and flashlight as well, so that just adds to it. Now once she realizes that he's lying, that's where again everything starts to turn, and he now turns into what we believe is going to be like a serial killer type role or type person. He ends up bounding her up, dragging her down the hallway, and this is after she has found, based on the story that he was telling her, she had found a cell phone, found a body fitting this description and fitting the pieces of that story. So again, she found out all this information, and now she's being dragged into it. Now she's being bound up, she's being put down in this back room. Now while she's trying to escape, that doesn't work out for her, because he's used this drug, or this, I don't want to call it a chemical, but this liquid drug that he has in this little vial to drug her and subdue her. Eventually, he believes he ends up killing her, and as he's doing so, he's describing his first victim. But as he's describing that victim, he starts to look at her, and there's a very specific point where he describes a tattoo that this first victim had. Well, as he's committing this crime, he realizes, wait a minute, she has this exact same tattoo. And then the story just completely switches, where he's the one having this either psychotic break or going through this psychosis where everything he has been seeing and doing hasn't been real. Now all of a sudden he is surrounded by all his female victims, including her and including the one he described as his wife, and he starts to have a mental break. There's police lights outside his caravan, so he thinks they're there for him, that he's finally been caught. And then all of a sudden, it's just like a switch. Everything goes back to normal, as if we are right at the very beginning of the film. There's a knock on his door. He goes to open the door, and it's these kids that were playing a prank on him. And this is pivotal, because he was describing this happening to him every night, multiple times, to the visitor earlier on in the film. But as the story ends, he reaches in his pocket, pulls out this vial, and the vial is now empty. And then he starts to laugh, closes the door, and then we hear a thud, and he has now died. Well, this vial that had that chemical in it when he was having that psychotic breakdown or psychosis, where all of his victims were there, they had forced him to pour this into a bottle of vodka or a bottle of liquor, and he was then downing the entire thing. Again, thinking that it wasn't real, he didn't realize that what he had done until, again, he like snapped out of it, and then came to, and now realized he had drank it himself, and he was going to die, and just laughing off, like almost like it was ironic, like, oh, I did all these things, and now I just did it to myself. How ironic is that I'm the one that drank it, and now I'm going to die. There's no stopping it, right? So that's where the movie ends. Again, that was a very quick synopsis of an hour and 28-minute movie. But as I mentioned, I would say I would give this one an easy 4 out of 5. And the reason I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 is because I think to do films, as I mentioned earlier on, in a central spot with just very limited actors that have to carry the entire story and have to carry the audience's interest for a full hour and a half, that's very difficult. Whether it's one actor that we've seen in some films or two actors, in this case it was just really two actors doing it. I think their back and forth was really well done. Again, it's a slow burn film, but I feel that the slow burn does keep you hooked and interested until you realize the shift in the story and then what's going on. Now, the last part of it does get a bit where they're trying to, I don't want to say force the horror imagery, but in a way they are, where they kind of change the lighting to now everything is this like red hue, and you have all these women who are showing like their wounds from what he did to them. So it does try to play off of that a bit. It steps out of the psychology or the psychological horror subgenre into almost this gore. But it doesn't go too far, I believe, and in my opinion, it doesn't go too far. I think it played on it just enough to show you, hey, these were his previous victims, and they weren't disposed of, gracefully, right? So, again, I would give this a 4 out of 5. If you haven't seen it already, check it out. It's on Shudder. You may have already seen it. Like I said, this film has been out in the U.S. since early mid 2024. It's just now I'm getting to it on my list, but thought it was worth just doing a quick video, quick review with my opinions of it. So if you haven't done so already, it's called again You'll Never Find Me. Sorry. And again, it stars Brendan Rock and Jordan Cowan. Check it out. It's on Shudder for streaming if you have it. If not, you might even want to think about signing up for Shudder, not just for this film, but for other horror films that we'll be doing reviews on as well. So, all right, everyone, that's going to do it for today's video. If you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I just want to say a quick thank you to all the new and existing subscribers. Thank you for all the support. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know, have you seen You'll Never Find Me, or is this a film you're interested in seeing? And once you see it, again, come back, drop a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you thought about it. Otherwise, we will see you at the next one. Peace.